Hi, guys. I thought I had another hour, so I was participating in the other groups, but I can see now that that was a mistake. So yeah, I guess I'll just go with the slides as they are, and then I know the material pretty well, so I can answer any questions you might have, or hopefully will um, forgive me the any kind of awkwardness and get going here. But I'm gonna send the slide, which I have just uploaded here, and I'll put it into the Gravity group, and then I'll share my screen. So okay, Gravity brings us together, and this is the second Graviton training, and what we're basically talking about here, and I'll be talking about today, is some context about what the whole thing is doing, and then my basic role here is to be the great contextualizer. And so yeah, Anne Marie is asking about this is the first session of the second Graviton training, so that's basically what's going on. And so yeah, so I was asked to sort of talk about myself initially, and I'm basically I'm a person who runs a yoga center. I gave up everything I owned and lived in a Hindu monastery for about 5 years. And this was after spending a lot of time working in Silicon Valley, and also I've worked in Seattle for Microsoft, and so all the big companies you've ever heard of, I probably worked for them. This is kind of a list of my major things in my life. So I'm on the autism spectrum. I basically call myself a polymath because after years of consuming different special interests, I've sort of acquired a number of things which over time have meant that I can do a lot of different things well. So I've been a computer geek since I was in 8th grade, taught myself machine language on an Apple IIe. Also, was a monk in a yoga and Vedantic lineage. It's the Shivananda organization. If any of you have ever taken a yoga teacher training course, my guru invented those. I'm a spiritual yoga teacher, NVC practitioner. I've founded 3 nonviolent communication groups, coached elite endurance athletes. My wife is a former endurance athlete as well. Yeah, I'm a writer. I do graphic and web design. Some of you will see some of the graphics that I've designed today. I'm in the Trusted Seed and training Gravitons. I'm also married to a woman who has 2 degrees and some medals in some major competitions. So she's very inspiring. She's also a social justice advocate, and right now is up dealing with the Fairy Creek blockade, trying to save the last old growth rainforest. So incredible motivation and help for me. So in token engineering commons, we often talk about ourselves as a shelling point, and I'm not sure that everyone knows what a shelling point is, but the idea behind the token engineering commons is that we would become a shelling point for token engineering. That is to say, we are the people who other token engineers turn to and choose by default in the absence of communication or other options. And so I've basically written this out to say that the idea behind Gravity and the future Gravity DAO is to generate within our members and the partner organizations who we service and the DAOs that we speak to a kind of proactive anti-fragile organizational culture through robust sense-making, shared mental models, and language systems, which are important because often we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what, let's say, the right programming language is for doing a particular project, but we often don't spend time coming up with shared mental models and languaging systems in which we can discuss how cultural things can work. And often, because we don't do that, certain kinds of conflict can arise, and or the erosion of trust, which is a huge part of what we're here to do, is to create trust. And so also, with human and ethical technology and services that would bring us together even in the absence of communication. So the whole purpose behind Gravity is to find ways to do exactly this. As Gravitons, it's important to kind of recognize that all people in organizations contain a psychological shadow, and so our job is to be highly aware of the presence of these sort of, when people are trying to do a positive thing, there is a kind of block to some project mechanism which can come up, and to become aware of how those things reveal themselves, before and after conflict has already arisen. So the point of being a Graviton is to try to get to the point where you're creating trust and then manage it at the same time when those trust mechanisms have broken down. So we're thinking both preventatively and in terms of trying to work out how to respond to those things effectively when things do occur. And so there are three basic mechanisms that I've talked about that we do, where we typically, when we're speaking about trust creation in a online situation like this, it's often true that we have sort of curated material that's come before us, and we have moderators, and then we have cross-pollination things which are happening. And so there's actually a fair amount that you need to know as a Graviton to both figure out how to create trust and to deal with it once bad things are happening. So at the point where we're here kind of in the middle as moderators to assist with all three of these processes. So some basic skills for Gravitons are, number one is compassion, mindfulness, situational awareness to understand what's going on, to have really expansive thinking, the ability to contextualize what's going on, and some clarity on action modes, which we'll get into in my second presentation, which will be number 6 in this series. This is a kind of a graphic which explains it all in context. There's a lot going on here. Again, this was developed with a view toward creating kind of a DAO behind this, but these are all the different aspects of things that we're talking about in terms of, Gravitons. And what's great about this is that we're actually going to be able to, as a Graviton, you might feel drawn to one thing more than another. And so we actually have book clubs around Ostrom's principles. We're going to have a practice group and a book club around nonviolent communication. And those of you who are a little bit more sort of alternate distribution or dispute resolution and mediation and escalation, and eventually spinning up into the legal side of the picture, those folks who are interested in that, then you'll have these 4 different aspects to talk about. So primarily, what I'd like to do is just cover them all in a broad way, and then talk specifically about the developmental thinking, how it can contextualize the rest of these things. Any questions so far? Okay. So part of the thing that I was asked to do is to talk about the unified vision in Gravitons in terms of each of these 4 principles. You'll notice that the 4 principles are ways of unifying, right? And so So there are two halves of the human brain. You have the left brain, which is the divided way of thinking, which is typical in the sort of centralized world, the centralized corporate world, the centralized banking world. It's a very divided, narcissistic kind of approach to things where we externalize costs, and there's an awful lot of the things that cryptocurrencies and token engineers are sort of averse to in that universe. And the whole point of being a graviton is to be able to sort of heal things, right? So you take the divided stuff and bring them back together. So each of these principles is a methodology for unifying according to the different situations that we find ourselves in. And our primary role is to think in unified ways when other people cannot. And secondarily, then the role is to educate and expand on our own and our group's ability to remain unified against a variety of potential stimuli. That is to say, stimuli being things that would sort of seek to divide us. And this is a lifelong learning process, and it's also very generative. And I'll show you the generative, almost cellular process that we're talking about with the curation, moderation, and cross-pollination that you can develop in terms of see into the people who might be divided by conflict, and to see through the situations that we find ourselves in. So this did not import very well, so I'm going to have to maybe bring it up in the original presentation to show it.
I just want to say that for the people assisting, I will be sending the POAPs by DM to your Discords. So yeah, everyone can be aware that they will receive the link to claim for the participation on this session.
Okay, so I'm gonna reshare my screen here. So yeah, principle A is basically the idea that all the other principles are contextualized into in terms of trust creation. Connectin is a framework that in which we can understand what action mode is required, and that is to say, to create trust, you really have to respond appropriately to situations. So if you're responding to a complex situation in which you need to experiment with something that you assume is a simplified, known thing, then it's going to tend to erode trust. Whereas if you're responding in a complex way to a complex problem, then that's an appropriate action mode to work with. And so just having this kind of developmental thinking and contextual thinking really helps. Spiral dynamics and integral theory is also extremely helpful in terms of when we get into nonviolent communication with Dan. One of the ways that you learn about nonviolent communication is that you need to understand that it is actually something which is designed to prevent you from making an enemy image out of somebody. And spiral dynamics and integral theory is a very well-developed developmental framework that enables you to, instead of looking at people who are behaving in a certain way and sort of judging them and othering them. You can say, well, this person is behaving out of a sort of a red or a blue or a green perspective, and I can see why they would do that instead of doing something else. And so it prevents you from creating an enemy image out of people. And so we'll get into that in a little bit. And then in terms of I think where we're headed a little bit in our organization is once you decentralize, then what do you do, right? So then how is it that you develop people individually in terms of the overall DAO space? And so we as Gravitons, in many ways, by helping to bring people together, that is itself a kind of developmental process. And so, so developmental organizations, and I think we do a lot of this without explicitly calling ourselves this. We think about what it is that we want to reward and what we want to educate. And it's important to note that what a culture educates is what it becomes. So in many ways, by educating Gravitons, we find good ways to create trust creation and to resolve conflicts before they get out of hand. All of this takes place in a context of a kind of a meta-modernist outlook, where we care about all the psychological health of all the participants in our systems. And so what I was saying before about, okay, we've decentralized, now what? A lot of people are just like, yay, decentralization, but there are that actually creates the potential for a lot of trust creation mechanisms that can exist, that didn't exist in centralized systems. And it also creates a lot of potential places where conflict can arise. So just understanding the context in which all of our efforts here in the Token Engineering Commons are arising is one of the main purposes of this sort of initial outlook. I would also say that systems thinking versus complexity thinking is an interesting thing to keep in mind as a Graviton, because a systems thinker is really going to be somebody who kind of tops out at the good and best practice side of the picture, where the experimentation is kind of done, and now we just are left with the complexity of the system. That's the systems thinker. And a complexity thinker are people who are sort of willing to go down the road of doing experiments and not really knowing exactly what's happening. And so that's actually been the history of the Token Engineering Commons up to now. And with this new Gravity DAO and even the Common or the Comms DAO that's coming up, we're doing a lot of complexity thinking. And so it's important as Gravitons to understand all of these contextual things to grasp what possible things you may find as you participate in conflicts and trust creation processes in the DAO space. So this gets us into this cellular process of generating trust. And so almost always you're going to be in a situation where you're going to need to iterate something. So the participation and iteration portions of this have a process to them. And each of them sort of begins with, hey, there's this thing we're going to do, and we typically promote that. And then there should be informed consent. And then we go through this process where we've taken that curated material and we have somebody who's kind of moderating it, whether it's Griff or Livy or myself or whatever. This can also apply in many ways to the process of we follow as Gravitons in terms of moderation and that type of thing too. So I just thought I would show you this just because it should hopefully end up with a kind of living wisdom out the other end of it. Now, as a contextualizer, the AQUAL model here is what we're looking at. And each of these colors represents kind of a developmental altitude. And that is to say that there's a, what do you want to say, a maturity as you go through certain kinds of systems. And what I'll explain to you is there's a kind of narrative framework that I use to talk about this in terms of as a person is participating in the token engineering commons, your I, your self and consciousness, and you are at a certain developmental level, whatever it is. And then you're like, okay, now I'm going to interact with this culture and worldview of the token engineering commons. And then that token engineering commons is going to create a social system and environment and a Discord and a forum and all these different things. And even, the Gravity group itself is one of those social systems. And so what basically happens after that is that we basically extrude something. So it says brain and organism here, but really you could say that it is these various mental models and other things that we've created, technologies and processes that we've created. And then those systems interact again with the individuals involved in them. So what you can see is that if you've got somebody who is coming in this achiever self mentality, which is where a lot of corporatist things come from, and you're then interacting with a pluralistic or an integral group like the Token Engineering Commons, the potential for conflict can exist there too, because then this person is typically going to think in scientific rational ways, and there could be a conflict between any of these colors. It's also true that you can see that organizations will typically operate on a kind of chord, right? So there's generally going to be an anchor, something that's in the middle, and then they will work across these. So a lot of corporations work on kind of a red, blue, orange setup, and that's why there's all this kind of centralization and everything, is because there's a kind of safety and ancient nations kind of idea, and then corporate states is kind of the developmental social system that ends up being in that. That's why it doesn't really work with a lot of folks. And now, people who want to participate in groups like Token Engineering Commons and a lot of DAO spaces are going to be more value communities and integral commons than anything else. And some of the growing pains that you'll notice in the DAO spaces and our participants come from the sort of mismatch of the individual consciousness and its development with the aims of of both the culture of worldview and the social systems of those groups. And so this is really helpful as a contextualizer to know the potential situations that you could be going into. And so we're going to talk about some other tools that can help in terms of this too. And one of those is polarity mapping. This is a very beautiful system, and there's a link to a training that I can give you. The introductory video by itself is worth the price of admission, but maybe we can find a way to purchase the polarity mapping course as a group. But it's just very beautiful. So some of you might have seen the SWOT analysis in the past. And what this basically does is it creates a situation where you have the ability to sort of resolve these polarities. So, for example, the conflict between safety and innovation is often a common problem, and so this gives you a way to work this kind of thing out. And it's a little bit too complex to describe only in this one thing, but I think what we'll try to do, along with NVC and further talks about spiral dynamics, we can have another hopefully follow up to how to resolve polarities. So now what we're currently working on is we're working on constructing the DAO with the other Gravitons and participating DAOs. And you guys not only are from getting POAPs, but also get to influence the future direction of the Gravity DAO. and what we're going to work on. And then we've already shown some of these graphics to folks like YGG Anderson and Jeff Emmett, who are creating this DAO to DAO stuff. And so we'll have some supporting technical underpinnings for negotiating and finding common trust between DAOs. And I'm basically taking questions. Anything you'd like to add, Juan?
Yeah, for sure. Well, in Gravity, the idea is to be able to bring communities and community members together, even in disagreement. And what we're trying to do is also to normalize talking about conflicts, and that makes us more competent to deal with it. Like, if we never talk about conflict in an organization, when conflict happens, everyone is going to start running and pulling their hair, like without knowing what to do. And it's important to understand that in this type of organizations, we need to have some justice systems, and that everywhere you go where there is a social organization or like a group of people, there's going to be a justice system. It can be an invisible justice system that no one talks about it, and like it will be still a justice system. Like, not having a justice system is also a justice system. But what we are trying to do is to recognize the importance of having a justice system, to have credibility and build trust over coordination in this type of communities. And we also think that, yeah, we can have several types of justice systems, but the justice system that we're trying to promote is based on mutual monitoring. Because when we were reading Ostrom, she says like it's very expensive to have like external monitors monitoring the actions of a community. So what we're trying to do is to build competence within people in the community, so that the people inside the community act as peers supporting each other. And that's why we're developing these skills, and the training has like a lot of topics, and we're starting with the contextualization and like talking about creating trust, because like without trust you cannot solve conflicts. You have to trust that there is a system that is not biased, in order for you to rely that that system is going to be fair with you, and that it's not going to like, yeah, it's not going to like influence the outcome of a decision. So
And those
yeah.
principles in particular are to care for the commons. And what you'll notice is out in the centralized world, there's these pockets of sort of greed and everything, and then that is now extended off into the commons too. So you end up with the prisoner's dilemma and the tragedy of the commons. And the fundamental principle of token engineering and what this was founded on was Ostrom's principles, right? So the developmental thinking has come sort of after as a contextualizer for that sort of thing. But to care for the commons is part of that process as well. But we don't just care about the commons. We care about all the individual people, and that's why Principle C exists, where we talk in terms of nonviolent communication, holding space for signal inside of noise, avoiding enemy image creation, and making sure that we're dealing with people in a humanistic fashion, right? And what you'll notice is, as you move through this process, is that the sort of legality and the formality of this thing sort of escalates as you start from principle A and go around to principle D. But it's true that we need sort of larger contextualizing principles. And on the trust creation side, being able to understand all these different things in terms of the first principle, being also able to care for the commons, which is that part, sort of, if you have two people in a relationship, there's a third thing which is in the middle, which is the commons. So if you're married, you have yourself and your partner, and then you have all your shared relationship and property and kids and all these other things in between you. And it's caring for that is sort of principle B. And a lot of that negotiation and other things is principle C. And then, when things really aren't working, we then go into principle D. But at each aspect of this, we're trying to transform the conflict into something which is greater, so that we can get back to the first principle. So is that reasonable?
Yeah, and like in these kind of organizations, where there is so much of a technological focus, sometimes we forget about the humanity and the human side and the human
True.
aspect of it. And I feel that more and more we're starting to talk about this, because like these kind of organizations are not only enterprises. These kind of organizations are also communities, and it's important for community members to support each other, because like in this context where we are spending so much time with people, we cannot feel that we only work and that we don't know the people who we are working with, and like we only know, we only see avatars, and we don't know about what the other person's struggle is. And our intention with this kind of services is for people to request support in a variety of situations. Not only we have conflict with other people, sometimes we have internal conflict, or sometimes we just want some advice of someone that can hear us in a safe space. And we need to develop that trust and that confidence between people. And the idea is that the people that pass this training can be seen in the community as an easy access agent to request support in a variety of situations. And yeah, it is to enforce and to empower the human aspect of DAOs. We cannot have like organizations that exploit the human, or that they are not comprehensive to human needs, but rather we need to have more comprehensive DAOs, and for people to have an joyful experience by participating.
Yeah, and so in terms of sort of second order stuff, part of the thing to understand is that it gives you an advantage as an employee, as an employer, as a DAO, to have this kind of thing anchoring your culture, and it's a really excellent skill, both personally and professionally, and as a cultural context, to sort of have this entire framework understood. So is there anything else you have, Juan? Can I open it up to questions from folks?
Yeah, I just would like to say that also, and this is something that I'm going to talk in my next session, but that in these kind of organizations, we also reproduce an organization identity of false self, where like everyone should be happy, everyone should be always available to carry more load of work, and like yeah, we and sometimes we are false, like we don't voice out our concerns. And the idea of having gravity in an organization is also to be able to have a safe space to communicate. and yeah, to talk about the things that normally we don't talk about, and to feel that if something seems unfair, there is people that is caring for the experience in people in their organization, and not only like, okay, we are going to exploit people, and like we only care for you because if you work for us, but if you stop working for us, yeah, like we don't care why, not even why did you stop like contributing. And and yeah, I feel, and I think that we see a lot of conflicts between members in organizations, but it's not only important to be able to provide support, like in a professional way, like mediation when the disputes scale, but and that's why we're starting with this, but it's also important to have like a cultural understanding and a cultural effort to build trust and to build relationships and to build credibility within the system, and that's why it's so important to have, yeah, safe spaces to integrate, um, and to let people like feel that their concerns can be expressed, because if we don't foster feedback, or if we don't have safe spaces for people to communicate, there will be a lot of things that will happen, and they will never be voiced out. Like people won't feel comfortable if they don't have a safe space to communicate, and warranties of that, what they're communicating will be processed as an input to the system.
And one of the things you'll notice is, if you're looking at this kind of complicated graphic, is trust creation is a general principle. It also has an impact on security. So if for example, we're creating token engineers and improving the lives of token engineers and teaching them from an ethical standpoint, like we do in many of our technical things. The point of this is that we're dealing with money here, right? We're making tokens and things, and trust creation is almost the most important thing about this thing that we're talking about, right? And so having the reason why people put their money in banks is because they have a level of trust about that. And so it's not just for the participation in the token engineering or an individual DAO, but also just for the overall, sort of ethical culture and promotion of ethical culture within this particular area of work. So, any other questions at this time? Let's maybe Livy or some of the stewards can start.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jovian. I just wanted to second, I think it's what Juan was saying. I really feel like when there is a conflict, what we see as a conflict, it's the opening up of a space for complexity to be added into the perspective. The collective perspective. Unfortunately, like if you look at it at like in a binary, you're like, oh, it's a failure. Like it's a failure for us to keep moving along with the same rules and expectations as we had before, or it's a failure in like universal adoption of the rules and expectations which we had. But a conflict is actually, I think, a hugely valuable opportunity to open up a new space to like grow a root up or down or sideways or in a new direction towards creating a more complex perspective. So unfortunately, the hurriedness to resolve or brush under the rug or decide a winner or loser, or to stay in this kind of binary like approach, like the rushness and the efficiency, that's like the mode that people are usually in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, just like giving someone an opportunity to view this as a valuable moment, where like the organization can grow and its collective intelligence can become more complex. I think is a really positive thing. So I'm really glad you guys are doing this. Thank you.
Well, and that's a very good observation. One of the things that you'll get in my second version of my training is this viewpoint on the Cynefin framework. Can you guys see this thing says Cynefin now on it?
Yeah, it's showing
It's on screen. So yeah, so this is actually what I was saying before about, gravitons will figure out what are the different action modes that sort of work in terms of this. And exactly what you just said is, allowing for complexity, right? So what often has happened is that we have these known, familiar, bucketized, rigid version of things. And if you don't fit into that, then you end up falling off of this cliff and end up in chaos. But then if you can collect yourself and start experimenting with things, then you can actually find solutions and then bring them back up and make more space in the known and familiar. And I think in many ways, the token engineering commons culture overall is working really hard to to kind of work backwards in this way. So even though things might seem chaotic in this space, we're experimenting on it. We're creating knowable things that might seem complicated, and then bringing them up this really tall ladder to make them clearer and easier and simpler to understand. So, and that's the DAO space in general. That's our job as Gravitons, is to help those people who are doing the complex. And so it's very beautiful that you actually recognize that. So we'll get into that in session 6 that I'm teaching as well. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm new to all of this. Like, I'm learning about, I didn't know what a DAO was. I had to look that up a few days ago in preparation for coming to this. I'm loving what I'm reading. I'm really excited to be a part of it. I appreciate y'all putting this together. I'm also just curious, the way that you're presenting this, I guess, is I'm trying to figure out if gravity, or if all of this will be more applicable or make more sense if we're also part of another decentralized organization. This is my first interaction with this whole idea in general. So I guess I just wanted to maybe, if you could address that, or if this is something that can stand alone in terms of my initial.
My job initially here is just to give the highest level of context. Each one of these 4 principles has a massive amount of really cool and very practically applicable things, So for Ostrom's principles, for example, is extremely useful in sorting out how to avoid things like the prisoner's dilemma in your organizations, how to speak about and resolve conflicts, both interpersonally, but also in other ways. NVC can help. And the cool thing is that each one of these things kind of cross-pollinate. So the developmental thinking and nonviolent communication are very related once you understand them. The same thing with nonviolent communication and Ostrom's principles in terms of, low-cost conflict resolution. The lowest cost conflict resolution is that you educate everyone to work on conflict resolution, and then you guys can all do it yourselves without having to have a third party. Do you see what I mean? And so you can see that all of these have incredible amounts of relationships to each other. And what I said before is, if you're in a DAO, what the DAO educates is what it becomes and what it values, right? And so if you take a look at any other DAO you might be in, you can very clearly see what their priority is based on what they spend their time educating, right? And so what we're trying to do
actually,
go ahead.
If I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just that's actually where my question is what I'm not a part of any other DAOs like this. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't want to make sure. I can't quite tell if this is intended to be something where we're expected as Gravitons to be in a DAO outside of Gravity.
Yeah, I can answer that. And
yeah,
here in the participating people, there are people from a lot of DAOs, and it's great because we are kind of spreading this message through other DAOs. But if you are new to the DAO space, becoming a graviton can also help you enter other DAOs, because you will gain these tools which will let you contribute in this cultural aspect of other DAOs. So yeah, if right now you're not part of a DAO, after becoming a Graviton, for sure you will find some community where you can contribute. And I also one of the things that I love about Gravity, it's also that it is like an alternative for people who is not so tech related, to collaborate in DAOs, because sometimes we only think DAOs are yeah, for the tech guys, but it's also important to have this social aspect. And when you get trained in these skills, any DAO that would love to implement Gravity, you could collaborate with them. And yeah, from a human side, and not from only from the tech side, because yeah, and this is a distinction that I love that the TC makes, and is that we have soft governance and hard governance. We have this software governance where things are so hard to change because they are in code, and they are like a technocracy. But that technology is put into place within a human organization. So you can have a perfect code, but if the community that is going to deploy that code is broken, the code is just going to be yeah, bits in the cloud. But the idea is to be able to empower this kind of new institutions, so that they are not only better than our regular institutions in the sharpness that they have, in how many transactions can they have per second, but also that we can have these institutions to be more comprehensive to human needs, than the ones that we have right now. And that's why it's so important to have support in a community. I cannot see myself collaborating in a community where I am only seen as a number or as a product, and where I cannot talk to the people about maybe if I have a conflict in my life, and yeah, and feel supported. Because when we are the most productive is when we feel complete, when we feel fulfilled, when we feel comfortable. And this is also something that can help to improve the workflow of organizations, because sometimes we see that the organization is having a roadmap, and then a conflict happens, and then everything gets screwed. So the idea with having projects like Gravity inside DAOs is that, okay, you can have a conflict that can create a polarizing scenario, but there will be people inside the community that will be working so that the community doesn't split in the first decision. Maybe if the best decision is to split, that would be something that would be a lot, put a lot of thought, but it's not the first decision out of our rage instinct of yeah.
So to answer your specific question, this is also the first DAO I ever participated in. I had no idea if I was ever going to be able to contribute anything to this group. I'm almost famously clueless about cryptocurrency in general, but somehow, because of the nature of the cultural context that I found here, it's I mean, you'll notice it around the outsiders. This is kind of radical inclusion, right? This idea that people can come and show up, and it's not just about conflicts. It's also about how do you actually absorb people with a really diverse set of skills into your community, and that makes it inherently better as a community. And so yeah, I'm a little surprised, frankly, that I'm able to participate in any real way. So So I've tried to participate in other DAOs, but I just keep coming back to here, and I find myself lost. And I find that the costs of participating in other DAOs can be high, and I continue to be included more here than perhaps in the other DAOs that I've tried to participate in. So, yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Thank you so much, Rita Swan.
Is it possible to ask another question?
Yeah.
May I
I
ask
got
a
room
question?
for one more.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the clear introduction. It's been very enlightening. I'd like to ask a question about what your opinion is about the decentralized software in the making for conflict resolution, such as Claros, for example. How that maybe can be an addition, or maybe you have another view on it, and if that it's if that would also be helpful.
I love
Yeah,
to answer that question.
Go ahead.
And
Go ahead.
yeah, it's like there are different dispute resolution mechanisms, and Claros applies arbitration, where the third part acts like a judge and like states who the winner is in a conflict. But the change we want to have is that we foster self-compositive conflict management, and that is that the outcomes of the dispute are on like are on the parties. They depend on the parties. Like we are more like mediators, like we facilitate dialogue and we facilitate that the parties like make an agreement, but we cannot enforce any solution. And yeah, that's the main difference between other dispute resolution mechanisms, because when you have like in these traditional justice systems, you have a clear winner and a clear loser, and that also states in the duality of like winner losing, left right. But through Gravity, what we want to foster is communication and dialogue, so that we can have more integrative solutions to disputes, instead of like one clear winner and one clear loser. And like that fosters also adversarial positions, like you are my enemy. But the idea of this of Gravity is to be able to stand from a non-adversarial point to search for common beneficial solutions for the parties.
So dialogue before arbitration.
Yeah, like if parties don't reach an agreement through dialogue, we can scale to arbitration mechanisms like Claros, as you're saying. But this is like a step, so that there's not a clear winner and a clear loser, but rather than that we can find better solutions through compromise. It's based a lot in also in the prisoner's dilemma. Like if you have few communication, you're going to, or few information, you're going to take a decision that can be rushed. But if we foster dialogue, what we want is to like more make the conflict more clear, to be able to see other alternatives. And yeah, and through coordination, search for an alternative that can be beneficial for both sides, and not only for one side over the other.
Yeah, and it's also true that you can see that this is heavily weighted toward making absolutely every effort to avoid that kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? Like 3 out of our 4 things is incredibly detailed ways of attempting to avoid getting to that point. And obviously there are situations that people just come in and try to game systems and create conflict, or advantage things, or leverage things, or exploit
very
things.
clear, thank you.
You know, yeah.
I would like to say a comment and 2 questions, if I may. It will be very quick.
Please, Humberto.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see the avatars that I already know as people. So thanks for inviting. And I'm also very happy to be here, because I see the potential of Gravity as a training for cyber physical commons rather than just for DAOs. And this is something that may resonate with what Nick was saying at the beginning. So I say cyber physical because the Graviton training that you are explaining here is like the sheriff role, or the Graviton role is like the sheriff role within cooperatives, which responsibility is to monitor the code of conduct. But in cooperative, they lack the training and function to manage conflicts, as well as the function to create, maintain, and regenerate trust. So yeah, I've been very excited to learn and apply this within cooperative community that I am part of, as well in other. And thanks for inviting. And I have
some other resources and books for you around that from the Foundation for Intentional Communities and other stuff. So I'm aware of those things too. I just didn't include them here as resources.
Okay, great. That would be awesome. 2 questions. What should we expect, like, from? Are there any goals marked for every session? I say this because it helps me a lot to know the scope of every session, like in goals, so that I know which questions to frame in my mind when learning. And another thing is, will the Graviton develop the Gravity DAO components that you are showing as skills? Those are my and I lost the documentation regarding the course. So if you could share it again, Juan, with me, will be great.
I think what you're referring to is going to be in the Gravity channel, as far as links and what's going to be in each individual training. So you can have a look at that, and each, actually, I think the way we framed it was there's some things you can watch beforehand, and then there's going to be the training, and then there's some follow-up from that. So it's a pretty comprehensive document that includes a lot of this stuff that you're asking about.
Okay, great. Thank you. I will look at that.
Okay, so we're at the top of the hour. I'm willing to hang around for another few minutes if you have further questions or anything. But if you guys have other groups to get to, then we're happy to let you go.
Can I be heard?
Please.
Please.
Hey, it's Aloysius.
Hi.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something. I heard a term earlier, and I noticed it raised a flag for me.
Okay.
And it was the term sheriff. And I just want to I want to engage in this space and be open to communicating about language when it comes up. I want to be mindful all of this work that none of us are policing and carrying that sort of conditioning. I just want to name it as I'm feeling it. That's all.
That's very good. And I was going to bring that up. This isn't an enforcement mechanism. It's in fact, I think we've consciously chosen to not be an enforcement mechanism and to allow the individual DAOs or participants in the Token Engineering Commons. We do have our own enforcement thing, but I would say that that's a little bit separate from the main intention of Gravity. So
I would love to say something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, hi, this is Ryder. Thank you so much, Aloysius, because my flag also went up, and I just appreciate that being named. It's hard to slow things down sometimes, especially with so much information.
Yes.
Thank you to our presenters today. I also want to add that, I don't know who used the word sheriff, but it just really points to me. It's a reminder of living in a policed environment, and that we don't have. Sometimes we might not have the right examples or metaphors to use to describe what a graviton is, because we don't see a lot of it in the mainstream. So I just wanted to there's no wrongdoing there, but it's a testament to living in a police state. So, and it's interesting because I'm in a international space and I'm an American, so I'm wondering how I speak. I'm trying to make it not too American centric, but it's also, I think police state probably rings true.
Well, it's important to
but yeah, I do
for
see
sure.
I do see Graviton training and education as, you know, an abolitionist mechanism, at least an example of it. So yeah, that's just where I stand with that. Durgadas, I think I cut you off a bit there.
Oh, no, it's okay.
I just want to say something before someone else says that the flag. I said about the sheriff, but that is a different context because it's within cooperatives. So in the cooperatives realm, the sheriff is someone that enforces and can ban, like, for example, the president of the cooperative, if the president signs something that is affecting the whole cooperative because it's a corrupt decision, the sheriff can ban that signature and then immediately call the whole cooperative into a general assembly to take action into that and can bring dispute mechanisms, but they do not have this regenerative trust and maintenance that Graviton was saying. That's why I said, like, I'm really happy to have this training because it's adding to what the cooperatives, the environment lacks. So I see it as a 2.0. That's it.
Well, and it's actually an interesting study for what you just said, because in the context of the place where you're used to, that word has a very specific sort of definition and meaning. And for Aloysius to bring it up, and I was going to bring it up too, was just to understand that that word might have a different meaning to other people. And it is from this kind of contextualization that we're having now, and this discussion that we're having now. And the reason why we have 3 alternatives to even mediation or alternate dispute resolution or legal remedies, we really go a long way and spend a long time parsing this stuff just to make it so that everyone has a shared understanding and a shared language and a shared vernacular for managing all of this stuff. And the more shared that stuff is, the lower cost dispute resolution is, according to Ostrom's principles and so on. The whole thing just rolls up, and it's just benefit after benefit, trust after trust, beauty after beauty that you get from caring enough to spend time and parse those things and make those distinctions.
Also, I want to say that the Graviton training is designed. We start here. This is the first session, and we're contextualizing. We are also setting expectations of what are we going to be talking about. But during the 10 sessions, we will have some sessions that will be more in depth into organizational identity. We will have other sessions that will be more in depth about dispute resolution mechanisms. We will also deep dive on the gravity process. We will also have sessions about nonviolent communication. So like the whole course, we will have a course about leadership, a session about leadership. So the whole course rounds up to have like a very general overview of what a mediator or a conflict management agent in the DAO space could look like, and how through the processes that we are proposing, we are giving an alternative to organizations so that they have their own justice and monitoring systems. Like also gravity is not that you should take what we are doing and do it as the same. Like I know that there are people here from different organizations, and you can like iterate on this model, and like we have a registry where we map and where we keep the count of the different disputes that we have addressed. But I strongly feel that each organization should have their own registry, and like there should be at least like 5 people that can be visible people to for people to request access, to request support, and also that there should be variety within this group, so that it's not like one kind of unilateral thinking implemented, but it's also like a collective intelligence that develops the processes.
And I just want to say one other sort of foundational thing about this, and in my discovery of working on, my own sort of compassionate self, we're gonna, as Gravitons, one of the things that I'm asking you as somebody who's holding this training thing is to understand that there's a principle involved where the degree to which you extend compassion to yourself is the degree to which then you'll be able to extend it to others. And this is a cultural dynamic that I'm really interested in educating and propagating. And so this is part of it, right? You have to realize that there is that sort of axiomatic thing going on there, right? The degree to which you have a facility with conflict resolution, and therefore you're going to fairly amazingly discover that you're going to want to proactively create trust creation within yourself. Do you see what I'm saying? And then the more trust creation you principles you create within your own life and your own mind and in your own relationships, then you're going to then be able to extend those things out into the communities in which you participate. And so that's a basic axiom that I've noted in my own life and through this process of gravity, trying to talk to you all about, so that the culture can improve itself through the improvement of each of its individual members.
Can I just add something on a related? This is Suga here.
Hi.
Hi, Durgadas. Thank you for this wonderful first session. And I just wanted to say that. I wanted to say thank you, and on a related note, just to say happy International World Day of Peace to everyone today. And that's all.
Thanks, Suga. I feel
That's where I wore my T-shirt.
Yeah, we can't see you.
I feel that the main goal of Gravity would be to contribute to building peace in the world.
Yeah.
Like we see so much conflict in not only in DAOs but in the whole world, that being able to collaborate in conflict management in DAOs and also spreading the word about conflict management, it's going to be good not only for the organization that you represent, but also for yourself. And I say this as someone who like made a major in conflict management, and every day I practice these things, and it's always easier to talk about them than to practice them. Like when I get mad, my girlfriend always tell me, oh, that's the conflict management that you're talking about. And we are people, we are not perfect, and it's a lie to say that we are not going to have conflict management. Instead of avoiding conflict, is to be able to face it and to transform it. And it's a practice that is like everyday practice and everyday learning, and it's something that you can practice within yourself, within your relationship with others, within your organization. So yeah, this course is also something that can bring you like valuable things to your life.
It's a kind of living wisdom, really, and what you're talking about is perfectly aligned with that. So do we have any other questions or comments?
I had another comment. I'm sorry to trail on for so long. Okay. Yeah, the part of the unit that's about justice or like the resolution, it seems to put the perspective of the organization, or like what's best for the organization or the community, like almost like that's like the point of view of the graviton, or like that's the more important point of view, or that's what we're negotiating for. Whereas when you have a conflict, it's more like you just have a multiplicity of perspectives. It's like an opening up of like, you have individual 1, individual B, and you have the organization, and then there's dispute because there's a different idea of like what's right. but I think there's also a different idea of what's just. Like, what is justice for the individual versus the organization might actually be different. So, I mean, I hope that the individual's justice is also, and maybe I'll stay, I mean, I will stay on, but I'll be looking for the how the individuals that might, how the individuals are going to be assisted during mediation or conflict resolution, because just solving for the organization and like sewing up loose ends and deciding what's in, what's out, that might not be what's best for the individual. So then how can like this other support system like validate the journey of that individual, maybe by giving them extra time or resources or other like things to help them like realign or recover. It's also really difficult to be an individual engaged in a conflict. It's almost like a chosen role, like you are chosen because of your difference to represent a conflict that can be a learning moment for the organization, but it can be a heavy burden on that individual while they're engaged in the conflict to express, you know, how they've been hurt, the pain they're in, and what they need to repair. So I think it's also important to not just like mediate and then enact justice, but rather find out what are the best paths for individuals and organizations, and how can there be a champion for the individuals and like a support for the individuals, as well as like just figuring out what's best for the organization.
Yeah, of course. And that's why we have so many things that sort of what you're talking about is I think sort of down to the principle D thing. So, you know, but at the same time, we have all this other stuff that would come beforehand. I mean, principle C is about nonviolent communication, is almost completely focused on the individual, you know, and providing them with that kind of support, right? And so, and it really depends if that person's issue is related to some tragedy of the commons, and we would be looking at the relationship between the principle C and the principle B before we ever got to, you know, the point of having to like, and I like to think that by trying to have such a complex and interwoven and interconnected, that's why I have all these different colored lines around here, is because it is all very intertwined in the sense that it is the complex system. I would hope that we would not reduce any one conflict down to a zero-sum game of the individual versus the organization, you know?
And
so
also, this is something that we feel that the reach of gravity is not like imposing any kind of action
exactly.
over a conflict, but more to deliver a set of tools that can be applied. So I also strongly recommend organizations and DAOs, as I was telling before, that each human group has a justice system, and there are a lot of DAOs that they don't have any justice system, that they don't have like a policy around how are they going to manage certain situations, or they don't have like a code of conduct. And that's why it's not easy to implement a conflict management mechanism in an organization that doesn't have like code of conduct. And it's important for Gravitons in each organization to be pushing the development of these documents that create rules and boundaries, and that give sense to the interaction. So yeah, it sometimes we hear like, hey, can you mediate in this conflict? And when we gather more information about the conflict, we don't have any objective document from the organization saying who who of the parts like acted against the community values. And then when we don't have these documents that set the boundaries, everything is subjective, and like everyone has is right, and everyone has the reason, because they are seeing it from their point of view. But it's also important to have the organizational point of view, to have a set of rules of what can be the expected outcomes of a dispute. And those documents are not imposed by Gravity. Like, each organization should have like their own code of conduct. Each organization should say like which actions do they promote, and which actions do they disencourage. And that is not like the same equation for every organization. There are more organizations that, like, yeah, each organization can have like their own boundaries. And that's why also we rely on the part of the Ostrom's principles, and we are going also to deep dive in the next sessions about Ostrom's principles, because actually the first principle is to have clear boundaries and rules. And how can you have like the fourth or the sixth principle, that is conflict management, without having the first principle, that is clear rules and boundaries? And yeah, it's something that you in order to have like, yeah, conflict management, you need to have like some previous steps. And that's why it's not only to like, yeah, let's have mediators. It's to have competence within the organization, and to build cultural practices that allow for conflict resolution.
I will say also, Jovian, that I participated in one group that the way that they've organized themselves is to say that we leave no one behind. Every single member of our community, we educate them and set expectations to do everything that they need for as long as they need to understand how all of this works. And then that way, when they take a decision on behalf of the group, all of the individuals are already represented by that group dynamic, right? And so depending on how the organization is organized, like that one, for example, the situation you're talking about the individual versus the group just simply can't happen in that situation, because their organizing principle is we leave no one behind. There's no one who is allowed to sort of, so it's really interesting to see how different groups organize themselves, right? And so you might have other people who want to have a combination of individuality and group dynamics. You see what I mean? And so the tuning of that and our participation and our advice about what the code of conduct should or would be would change based on that kind of internal culture, right? So this kind of gives hopefully an example that makes sense.
It really does make sense. I mean, what both of you said makes sense, is in like, that set of rules can hopefully continuously be built upon through, making it as robust as possible. But then, like, with every case study of a person, helping a person be productive in the community, you can add to that set of rules. You can add clarity. You can account for difference. It is difficult though when that line is established, like, oh, this is too much accounting for difference. Like, oh, I don't want to negotiate for this much difference. And that's like a place where I've seen organizations be like, we'll just let people leave, and right. It's like, oh, that's sad. And then you're like, sure. Well, you're just letting people leave because you're not like allowing the organization to like create a case study. Like, you're looking at situations as fringe cases or as bad or like, as something else, like external. And
at the same time, people have agency to be able to leave if they want to. And we've had situations like that in this organization where people said, this is a line for me and I'm just not willing to participate at that, right? And so and part of the reason why I put this sort of pink thing in here was so that you could sort of understand that it is a generative thing, and you can go around and around in this thing, and people like Gravity or SoftGov, or depending on whatever the context is of the working group, they all have a moderative role. They have what we've done already, which is the curated side of the picture, and then that sort of living yes and or what about this problem, that problem, and then
Cool.
it's just it's a and the whole point of it, and the reason why I have on the left side is living wisdom. It is a thing which is alive, right? And it seems to me that is actually part of being a graviton, is to sort of assist in the life of organizations by helping create and moderate this type of thing. I mean, in nonviolent communication, it's literally called a language of life, and that's why it is one of the 4 cornerstones of this process, so hopefully that helps. I'm gonna say I'm gonna cut it at another 7 minutes, so it looks like we got one more question here, and I can or comment, and then we can stop.
I only want to say too that I really thank everyone for participating, and that I look forward also to have a space to get to know each other better, and it would be great, to introduce and to get to know the group, because I see like a very diverse group and coming from different organizations, and it maybe not in this moment, but in other session it would be really great to share some experiences and to get to know more from the other side. That it's like we are always standing from our side, but one of the practices that we're trying to promote is to be able to stand in the other shoes, and to also learn and value from the other's experience as a peer. And for the next week, I will be facilitating, and I will be talking about conflict transformation and theories about conflict interpretation. And yeah, I really look forward to continue seeing you the next week, and I really thank you for coming for this first Graviton training session.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate your attention.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye.
Thanks,
Thanks, Durgadas.
Thanks.
Thanks, Juan. Thanks, Durgadas.
Juan.